Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhaj.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhaj of Authentic Living with Roxanne. So thanks for tuning in again this week. Today I have Peter Katz. Peter brings a little bit of a different experience to us, having a JUNO nominated musician. I would say that that's the first time I've had someone with this background on. He's a musician and a storyteller. So Peter, thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So Peter and I was trying to remember where our paths had crossed, and he had was visiting the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and we had realized we had met really, really briefly there. So let me tell you a little bit about Peter, and we're going to jump right into what he speaks on, and with his keynote kind of speaking engagements that he does. So like I said, he's in a JUNO Award and Canadian Screen Award nominated singer-songwriter, as well as one of the country's most in-demand keynote speakers. He's toured the world in support of his music, sharing the stage with some musicians like Glen Hansard and Garth Hudson from the band. And he has a gift of storytelling, and he's a four-time TEDx fellow. So that's going to be neat to talk a little bit about. He uses his work to inspire people to create their own path, overcome obstacles, and find success in whatever they desire. So Peter, tell us, I mean, that's a unique background. So I'm going to assume, I want to talk a little bit about, where you got in your path of music, because I would think that, that way of getting into the world could be a difficult path when you're trying to kind of, the music path, and then how it got you to the point where you started to talk about resilience. So maybe tell us a little bit about you and how you got into the music world.
Yeah, for sure. The music was sort of something I loved to do as a kid. I, played piano, played violin, and, started playing guitar. And as soon as I started playing guitar, started writing songs. I know those impulses for me were just connected. I think there was a simplicity to the guitar that you could just know a few chords and then you could already kind of start creating your own songs. So yeah, I mean that, the whole story of how I got into my music career is a long one with many twists and turns, but ultimately I kind of committed to a life as a singer-songwriter back in 2004, and soon after that, I put up my first, made it in my friend's laundry closet kind of album, and started, touring across Canada, and sleeping on floors and driving through snowstorms and kind of nice people feeding me, and and I got myself up to between 150 and 200 shows a year, and wow. I did that for years, and then I started touring in Europe, and the whole idea was just kind of one person at a time, one show at a time, shaking hands and kind of building a real career. And at the same time, in my mind, I also knew that the only way that I was going to get great at it was to do it all the time. I was never going to be able to perform at the level that I wanted to perform at, or write at the level that I wanted to write at, or connect at the level that I wanted to connect at, if I didn't kind of get my, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. And so as much as those, it was kind of a crazy many, many, many years of doing that intensity of shows, it didn't matter so much that it was kind of slow going for the first many years and there weren't a lot of people coming, because I was like, well, I'm cutting my teeth here. I knew that I wasn't as good yet as I wanted to be, and so I didn't expect it to work, because I was like, well, this is me learning how to do this. Mm-hmm. And then, after probably 10 years, I felt like, okay, I'm good at this now. And now I need to sort of dial it back so that I'm not devaluing myself by saying yes to everything. um, and around the same time as that happened, there had been, I sort of hit a critical amount of people where I could, go across Canada and I could play 20, 25 shows, various cities across Canada, and get several hundred people out in each of those places that would come see me, and same in the Netherlands and, a couple of other European markets. It started to look like a thing. And one of the things that happened is this mentoring group in Southern Alberta that works with youth had been using my songs as part of their curriculum. And there's a whole other story there, but essentially they invited me to come work with them, and I did all this work with youth, and I still do it. I'm not this summer, unfortunately, because of everything's canceled. But the reason that's significant to my speaking career is that I became friends with these people who are all teachers, and they had been coming to my shows, and my friend Dave pulled me aside one day and he said, "Hey, the stories that you tell on stage, kind of the way that you've lived your life," he's like, "I think it's an inspiring story to tell, and combined with the music," he's like, you need to turn this into a presentation, like a talk." And I'd never thought of that, but he, helped me kind of create that initial incarnation of it. And all of a sudden I found myself doing this like hour-long presentation for youth, which kind of got my toe in the speaking world. And then a couple years later, I was at a event that, our mutual friend Blake Fly was doing. And, he knew that I had been doing a bit of speaking stuff, and he also knew my music. And so he said, "Hey, at the end of my event, would you get up and say a little something about what we've all just experienced here tonight, and then play a song?" And so I got up and I just do what I do, and I said some things and played a song. And there was somebody in the audience who saw me and said, "Hey, I'm involved with this conference called Fireside. You need to come give a keynote at this conference." And so she pitched me to Fireside, and it just so happened, this is sort of these like cumulative effect things, that the guy that runs Fireside, his favorite song of all time was one of my songs.
Oh, wow.
And so he put me as the closing keynote, because he thought I was Bono or something, so he put me as the closing keynote to all 450 delegates, even though there was, like the head of innovation for General Motors and all these CEOs and all these fancy people. I was the Saturday night at 8 p.m. closing keynote for this conference.
Amazing.
It was amazing. And so I recognized that this was a bit of a coup, this was kind of a huge opportunity. And so I worked with Blake and several of my speaker friends and built this talk for, entrepreneurs for the more business world, and delivered this talk. And I felt 450 people all at once, like, lean in. And it was the most validating moment of my life, where all of the things that I've done kind of culminated in this almost ultimate format for what I do. And that one talk changed my life, because there was all kinds of fancy people in the audience who immediately pitched me to Speaker Spotlight, which is the top speaking agency in the country, and they became my agent. And then my speaking career just kind of was like a rags to riches story, and it really worked, and it's been working amazingly well, and I just love it so much. It just dovetails so well with my career as an artist. And it's I'm just going to keep quoting Blake here, but Blake said, he's like, your music career is your laboratory, and your speaking career is where you present your results. And so I just love having these two things that work so well together. And I can go back to the well and write the music and kind of bang my head against the wall and kind of, basically live the stories and the challenges that then make me relevant as a speaker. And so, yeah.
What a perfect combination of, the skills along with the subsection of being ready and at right place at right time.
Absolutely. And I've also loved, sort of like I talked about, that I kind of spent my 10 years kind of learning how to be a good singer-songwriter and performer. When I moved over into the speaking space, again, I do both. I'm about to put out a new album, so that the two are happening at the same time. It's kind of all one career. But when I moved over to the speaking side, there was portions of my talk that I could immediately do at a world-class level, because I always play songs as part of my talk. I always tell stories as part of my talk, and I'm very comfortable doing those things because I've played 1,500 shows where I do that. But then there was the okay, this company, they have this problem, or this, they need this solution or whatever, or this is the story that needs to be told, or these are the challenges that our employees are facing, or this is what we need to celebrate, or blah blah blah. So I had to learn a new craft. As far as, I always say that sort of writing a talk is like, writing a great talk is like writing a Seinfeld episode, where like this happens and then this happens and this happens and they all come together in this great way at the end, but I've loved that, over the last several years of also doing professional speaking, that I feel like I'm getting better and better and better at it, and learning and learning and learning. And the way my brain works is I just love that stimulation of just the challenge of solving the riddle of just, how do I connect with this audience? It's, yeah, I love it.
So let's talk about resilience, right? Because obviously anybody that's trying to make it in, the movie industry or the music industry, the element of resilience, I would say, would be the big R, resilience. So when you think of resilience, define it for me as you know it, and or more so how you've experienced it, and what, how you think about resilience when you get out there and you kind of deal with people.
I mean, I always bow down to the feet of Brene Brown, who's kind of, as soon as I hear the word resilience, I think of Brene. But, my sort of lived experience of it is a fundamental belief, or a fundamental connection to the sense of, I am what I say I am, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do, no matter what. And so, like I am, my sort of purpose in my life is to connect with people and to help people connect with their hearts, and no matter what happens, even if I face rejection because this person doesn't book me, or like, what, my life is a sea of rejection, like it's just constant no's. But to me, it's like, well, there is nothing that can knock me off of that path, and that when you get knocked down, you get back up. And I think, when I think of resilience, I also think about vulnerability, about authenticity. I think about, that it's not about being resilient, is not about being a robot. It's about being a human being going through those processes. And as you move through the world, the things that happen to you, you turn them into wisdom. You turn them into strength. You go through a really hard thing, and that thing makes you realize, wow, I can do hard things. You have your heart broken, and you say, wow, look at how much I had put my heart out there. I'm going to do that again. Or I'm going to learn what I want to learn from this, need to learn from this, but I'm going to, like, your cumulative experiences make you bigger, stronger, wiser, softer, gentler. It's like when you speak to that old person, and they're just so wise and calm. It's because they've taken all the experiences in their life, and it's made them just the most beautiful human self. And so I think resilience is being on that path. And for me, there's been so many resilience tests, like through the pandemic, and And
So let's talk about that,
yeah,
because I envision, to get where you've gotten, like you said, you had to have gotten a whole lot of no's along the way.
every day.
And so if you think of that, and most people, they hear no and they go, oh goodness, I can't take that anymore. And you said that you stay connected to your heart amidst this. Tell me how you do that, because that's something that I talk a lot about in leadership, is really kind of zoning into why do you do what you do, and
Mhm.
the more connected you become to yourself and really what inspires you, that allows you to impact others around you. And if you're able to do it, so it's like an osmosis effect, in that if I'm connected and I know what I do, why I do what I do, then I'm able to kind of impart that onto others.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. So for me, this is one of the things I talk about in my talk, is I talk about this thing I came up with called my head on the pillow rule, which is, when I put my head on the pillow at night every night, I always ask myself, have I tried my best? Have I helped others to do their best? And that's just like this nightly connection with my integrity.
Mhm.
And it's not an integrity based on anybody else's standards, anybody else's expectations. It's just like Peter versus Peter. Have I tried my best? Have I helped others to do their best? And
Mhm.
I feel like being connected to our integrity is 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 so fundamental, because it gives everything that you do, it gives it a sense of purpose. And
Mhm.
so when I have that sense of purpose of knowing what I'm doing, and why I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it, like doing it in a way that I'm proud of, then it doesn't matter. Like, I don't control the outcomes, right? Like, it doesn't matter. What matters is kind of how I'm showing up. And so, you know, I think that muscle was actually built in me. I'm just thinking of this right now as I'm talking to you. I think that muscle was actually built inside of me through all of the shows that I played when there was nobody there, you know? And I distinctly remember deciding that even though there was nobody there, I was going to play my heart out, because it was a matter of self-respect, of I drove myself here sometimes for 8 hours, like I'm sleeping on a floor tonight, but in this moment, I'm standing on a stage and I'm playing these songs that I wrote. And the dumbest thing that I could do right now would be to not show up with integrity to myself, of I'm
Mhm.
trying my best. And sometimes there's one person in the audience and I'm giving them the show as if I'm playing to 10,000. And I can honestly say from my heart, I've played over 1,500 shows. I have never, ever given less than 110% on stage. I know that. And so that's what gets me through. I think when you lose that sense of self-respect, when you lose that sense of integrity, you lose that sense of purpose, and then there's just nothing in the tank. Um,
So that moral perspective, because I talk a lot about authentic leadership and
mhm.
that internal GPS, which is that space that you go to and you
Yes.
need to check into often when you're
Oh,
getting
yeah.
those rejections. And I'm sure you have seen people that have lost that connection, that lose their way.
Yeah, honestly, it's so hard. I mean, the music business is so hard, and I'm seeing it. Like I could cry right now if I shared some of the stories about some of my musician friends right now, and just what they're going through, and I
Mhm.
can't even blame them. But it's because it's there's so many musicians out there that were already like just getting
Mhm.
by. They were working so hard, and like gig to gig to gig, and with everything shut down, they're just sort of done. But even pre-pandemic, almost every single artist that I kind of started with, that we were playing with, everybody stopped. And I don't blame anybody for that. That's not a judgment, but I've seen people sort of lose that hope, and it's so hard. It's really hard. And so I think like, well, why am I sort of one of the last man standing is, I think, because of that. It has been so important to constantly go back to that inner connection to myself, and to constantly go back to the work, to go back to, okay, pick up the guitar, sit down at the piano, like put on some music that you love and learn it. Do the thing that you say you are. I'm a singer-songwriter. Make sure I'm writing songs and singing them, no matter what. You're a speaker, you're a educator, you're a whatever you're passionate about. Most of your time needs to be spent doing the thing, or as much as you possibly can. And at the same time, I remember hearing Cheryl Strayed, who wrote Wild and, a bunch of great books. She talked about, okay, you're a writer. Even if you're a busy parent with 9 kids and you only get to write for 1 hour a month every Sunday from 2 to 3 p.m., you're a writer. And so never let anybody take that away from you. I love that movie Searching for Sugar Man, for those who don't know the story, this songwriter named Rodriguez, who kind of things didn't go the way that they were supposed to go in his career. And then in his 60s, he realized that his music was actually massive in South Africa. And he went to South Africa and literally was playing arenas. His music had been like the voice of a generation. And he was working construction in Detroit. And I look at that movie and he didn't have a chip on his shoulder. He's like, I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I make music and I put them out in the world. And just because he didn't know it wasn't working doesn't mean it wasn't working. And so I think like whatever it is that you're doing, it's about showing up for that thing, always trying to get better at it. And then obviously like that connection to self and that like integrity and that kind of loving kindness that you need to give yourself when you face all of the rejection is essential, because it's hard.
Yeah, that loving kindness. And I often talk about connecting to what we call in the clinical world, the EP, which is the emotional part, that deep part within yourself that intuitively you get to, Peter, as an artist and also a speaker. You have to go into a deep space within yourself to listen to that intuitive voice that's so deep, right? Which is so elusive.
Oh gosh.
Because we have the white noise everywhere, right? It's like bullhorns in our ears all the time, and until you can override that on an ongoing basis, it becomes difficult to listen. But let's talk a little bit about how you stay intuitively connected, and let's also talk about the supports that you have around you. What kind of support systems? Because I think that becomes very key. We can do a lot of things for ourselves, but we need people around us that kind of, even when we're self-doubting, they become the reflective lens that we need to kind of look around, even though we may not be believing in ourselves at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll sort of take that as a 2-part question, because the sort of way that I sort of stay connected and make sure that I'm kind of okay, to me really comes down to the fundamentals and remembering that I'm like this, bag of bones and that I'm a human. And so I need to do fundamental things to keep this human body okay. So, I've just had a workout. My hair is a little crazy right before this interview. So, like seeing exercise and health as a non-negotiable has been absolutely vital. I remember reading that, Barack Obama, was president of the United States, and he would work out every single morning for an hour, no matter what. So if he has time, we all have time. And so that, it seems like an obvious thing, but I really see health and fitness and taking that time as another act of self-respect of I'm worth it. And I used to exercise because I didn't want to be overweight. That was like my initial, and that's not that motivating. It's like, it's motivating for a time, but it's kind of superficial, and it's you kind of give up at a certain point, right? But probably 5 or 6 years ago, I kind of did this shift where I started to see exercise and, you know, taking care of my body as this gift and this thing that was, I'm doing this just for me. I'm not trying to win a race. I'm not like, this is my me time. This is like, and I started craving it like you would crave a piece of chocolate cake. And if I was sitting and I would see somebody running by, I'd be like, oh, like I want that too. And as soon as I kind of made that shift, then I fell in love with that physical activity, and it became something that I love to do. And every time I do it, I feel proud of myself. I feel my mental health is better. Like everything feels better. So that's been such an important thing. Same thing goes with what I eat, you know, like I eat whole food, plant-based. So, you know, vegan diet. And again, it's like every time I'm eating, I'm giving love to my body. I'm eating things that fuel me, that make me feel good, that give me mental clarity, that don't, I'm not in conflict with any of my ethics, with any of the planet. Like everything feels aligned with every meal that I eat. You know, I have a mindfulness coach that I work with, and a therapist that I work with. And so again, those things, you know, it's cost money, and I have to work hard to make that money, but it's like, these are all gifts that I give myself so that I can go do the work that I want to do out in the world. And I can have that deep well that I can get on stage and I can give of myself, or I can drive wherever I need to drive, or do whatever work I need to do in order to be able to spill over as a performer, as a speaker. I need to be filling that well every day. Sleep is another one too. I mean, these are all just basic things, but if I didn't say them, I would be missing the most important things, you know? And so those to me are kind of the fundamentals. And then as far as support networks, this is actually something that I talk about in my talks, is I talk about lifelines. And lifelines are those kind of one or two key people in your life with whom there's no disconnect between how you need to be on the outside and what it feels like to be who you are on the inside. And I feel like those lifeline relationships, they don't just happen. They're relationships that need to be intentionally nurtured. And so there's a few key people in my life that I keep that open lifeline to. And if I'm really struggling with something, or I've faced so much rejection and it's not something that I feel like I can sort of publicly share because I'm trying to sort of have a certain perceived value as a speaker or as an artist or whatever, I have some key people out there that I know I feel seen by, and that they know that this is what I'm dealing with, and I also can see them, and that's so vital. You know, in my talk I go into sort of longer stories about how important lifeline connections are, but
so how did you, because that becomes a very important, is vulnerability, right? Like here you are, like you said, perceived value or persona. And so there's,
yes,
in order to cultivate those lifelines, there may have been some things that you had to do a bit differently to be able to let those people know, here I am, this is Peter, this is, you know, public persona Peter.
yeah,
And then there's Peter, all encompassing Peter, every element of, but that takes a lot of strength to be able to be that vulnerable to people in your life.
yeah, it does. I mean, I think, you know, you have to invest in it, because it in order to really go there, you need to build that trust and safety. You know, it's like, I don't think you can just run around and like kind of overshare with everybody and expect to sort of have that genuine safety. I'm not sort of criticizing people that are, you know, vulnerable publicly or anything like that. I mean, I am too. But I think that really core, deep sort of seen and be seen kind of experience, I think requires an intentional investment of time and energy, and an intentional statement as well of, hey, can we be this for each other? You know, like I think
Mm.
it grows, but also, and so one little thing that I do with my lifelines is we will text each other the words, "What's your update?" And "What's your update?" is a cue to say, it's different than "How's it going?" Right? Because "How's it going?" Well, you know, this happened and that happened and this blah 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 blah. "What's your update?" is, "Hey, I'm available. I'm creating a space for you to let me know how you're really doing. And I see on Instagram, great, you're doing all these things and blah, blah, blah. But how are you doing?" And, you know, there's so many instances that you see of people that are seemingly really successful, and then, you know, they take their own lives, or they're
Yeah.
find out that they've been terribly sad behind the scenes, or there's all kinds of things happening. You're like, well, how could that happen? You know?
Mhm.
And I think it's easy how that could happen. And so I think creating those conduits is something that's been super helpful. And that kind of "what's your update" thing came out of a real moment of crisis for me when I was kind of in a really intense period, and you know, kind of had a panic attack essentially, and I just was so overworked. I had the sleepless night, and I had to drive for 10 hours to play this gig, and I just was, you know, and I reached out to my two kind of key lifelines, and it became really clear in that moment that my whole state changed when I felt seen by people that I had built safety and trust, that I knew could handle it, that, you know, that we had that rapport, that I wasn't burdening anybody. I like all of that was in place from the relationship that we had built, that I could let my full self be seen. And as soon as I reached out to them, I just sent them an email because it was like early in the morning. I fell asleep, and like there was this giant relief.
So
You
it's
know,
it's really cultivating it, because
absolutely, that's the word.
unfortunately, when we feel as human beings,
Yeah,
you know, and you were, you know, quite open in talking about seeing a therapist, a lot of people are afraid to share that. And I often say to them, with me being a, you know, a psychologist, is that it's really, you know, the space that we all need to get to, because we are often incapable of seeing the unconscious and the replicatable patterns that we persist, because it's kind of like a second skin, and we need somebody to kind of you know, highlight the spots that we can gloss over from our conscious brain, right? So I think my you know, in choosing the path that I took, you took the music route, I took the psychology route, is to really have people recognize that we all need the time and space to be able to listen to that deep spot. And oftentimes you need somebody else to kind of pull it out that has an objective lens.
oh yeah,
You know, but people are afraid of that because they think of that as, oh, I'm not well. And that's really not. I look at it as, you know, it shows that you are very well when you're reaching out and saying, I need.
I could not agree more. You know, that, you know, I mentioned I do this mentoring work in the summertime with the teenagers, and one of I've been doing it for 7 years, and so one of the students that was there my first year actually became one of the staff members. And long story short, we do this exercise where we talk about masks, you know, and sort of taking off our masks. It's a kind of powerful metaphor, and we actually build masks. So the students have a mask built on their face, and you know, while they're having the mask built, we're prompting them, saying like, hey, what does it feel like to be under a mask? It, you know, feels heavy, it feels, you know. And we get up on the microphone, and as grown-ups, we share with them like, hey, we also wear masks. We don't have it all figured out. You know, it's not just because you're a teenager. Like, so we are vulnerable with them, and we share of ourselves, and we share some of the masks that we make. Anyway, so one of this person who had been my student and was now a staff member, she got on the microphone and she said, I wear a mask of strength. And I was like, huh, you know, because strength is a word that we associate positively, you know, like, oh, it's great to be strong. And she said, I needed to learn to take off my mask of strength so I could let my real strength show. And I was like, I just got goosebumps again. I mean, I
That's profound.
It is so profound, because that's really it, is like, if we actually I'm getting emotional. If we actually want to be strong, we need to allow ourselves to be seen. And because you're not, it's just a house of cards otherwise, you know, and then the wind blows the wrong way and it all comes crumbling down. And so I'll never forget that. And I really, I admire her so much for saying that. And it's been one of my biggest lessons. And I could not agree more. I think therapy, self-care, you know, breaking down and sharing with a friend that you've built that trust with, or a professional, you know, seeking professional help, getting whatever help you need is a sign of strength, and it's a sign of wanting to get better and be more solidly fit. And the truth is the more that you're able to do that, you're stronger, you're able to do more, you're able to be there for others, you're able to contribute more. Like all the things that you're trying to be strong for, whether it's your family, whether it's, you know, whoever, you're more able to be there for them, you're more available by allowing for that vulnerability. I couldn't agree more.
No, I know we didn't talk about this, and maybe we can't, but I'm wondering, is it possible for you to play us something to close off?
I would love to. I don't. This guitar is broken. This is electric guitar, and
okay.
I actually have a great setup. Like this is. I'm just on my computer. I have an amazing setup upstairs, but I could.
Well, maybe next time. Maybe next time.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe next time, because I think I'm inspired, and you know, for those of you that aren't gonna see Peter's face, what I'm in tune with is that how deep he goes because he closes his eyes. And hopefully if you listen to this podcast, I would tell you to eventually, when it gets released on YouTube, to go, because I can see the space that you go to, Peter, because you close your eyes and it's almost like you're visualizing it internally. And I can just imagine what that must be like with your music, which I have not listened to. So now I'm going to go listen to one of your songs. And, you know, it just has been really inspiring for me to listen. And I love to listen to the backstories of musicians. For some reason, I've always had a fascination. And I just listened to Eric Clapton's story the other day, and I'm always inspired where they get their inspiration. And now interviewing you, I could see the depth that you go to be able to produce these things. So you said you have, two things. I want you to, obviously, anybody that's listening to Peter and wants to reach out to him to be able to have him speak. I know we are in a virtual speaking world. You can do that, or obviously conferences are coming up, but also you said you're releasing something. If you wanted to tell them a little bit about that, and we can also put the link in the show notes so that people can do both. So
yeah. Well, thank you. If I did have a working guitar handy right now, the song I would have played is a new song of mine called Paper Thin, and it would have been the perfect segue, but I wasn't prepared. But the Paper Thin is all about kind of vulnerability and letting that be seen. And the lyric in the second verse is, when your biggest fear, it ends up coming true. That's when you find out what you have inside of you. I'm braver than I ever could have known. These days have shown that to me.
Wow.
And it's really, so that would be a good song to start with. And of course, like you said, I give a lot of talks, and I have a great setup upstairs with multi cameras and, kind of a great audio. And I did 11 talks in the last 9 days.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you pivot? Because for most people listening, you know that the speaking training world with the pandemic, it got shut down. So how did you pivot to get doing as many talks? How did you kind of bounce back?
So I have a very strong survival instinct. And on March 12th, I gave a talk to RBC, and in the middle, like as the person was introducing me for that talk, they had to announce to the audience that there had been a COVID case on the same floor that all these people worked in. So that was my intro, and I realized as I was packing up my gear and going home that it was the gig was up, that something I could just smell it happening. And I think that night the NBA was canceled and kind of everything sort of happened. And so I'm not kidding. March 13th, I woke up in the morning and I said, I need to figure this out. And, over the next several days, I saw every single booking I had canceled. I had shows, I had so many talks, like my speaking thing was going amazingly, everything got canceled. So I came into this basement, this room that I'm in right now, and I said, okay, I need to figure this out. And I had $2,000 in my bank account, and I bought a camera, which is not the camera I'm using, and then it's set up upstairs. And I started just doing this deep dive, and I don't know, my instinct was that I need to create something that is not just a lesser version than a in-person talk. I need to create something that is its own great thing, and that people aren't experiencing as okay, I guess I feel bad, I'll support this musician, or okay, I guess I'll have this guy come, but it's not going to be sustainable unless it's of a really high quality. And so I basically figured out how to have kind of broadcast quality live music, have multiple cameras and lighting and switching and multimedia elements. I think I did my bachelor's degree. I did a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater Performance, and one of the things we talked about in that program was there's a difference between acting on stage and acting on a camera. When you're on stage, you're big and your arms are out and you're filling a space because there's, thousands of people there, and whereas when you're on camera, you move an eyebrow and it sends a chill down somebody's spine, which would do nothing if you were on stage. So I sort of approached my virtual work through that lens of, okay, I'm going to be looking into a camera. These are the parameters. And so, but I can do things that I can't do live. So I could be talking like this, but then I could be really intimately talking on the microphone, or I could get right up there and there's things that you can do to use the medium. And so I just did this 3-week deep dive. I was up till 6 a.m. many nights. I bought all the gear. I just was like, here we go. If you're opening a restaurant, you got to buy a bunch of stuff and go into debt and recover it. So I was like, well, this is me opening my restaurant. And I emerged on the other side, capable of doing a really high quality music performance, a really high quality talk. And I learned Adobe Premiere and created a reel for myself. And it just started working, and it sort of took a second for the wider world to start booking things, because everybody was just kind of scrambling. But then, at a certain point, companies and, associations, everybody, they were like, well, we can't ignore our people. We still need to bring in educators and speakers. And as soon as that started happening, I was standing there ready to go. And, I did 9, I did 11 in the last 10 days, but 9 of those were in 5 days.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
it was, in the last, since COVID, I've spoken to over 25,000 people, which is kind of amazing.
It truly is. And talking about, again, looking at the obstacles and then going deep and thinking, okay, how do I need to pivot accordingly? And then just going to what I call the internal GPS and saying, okay, what do I need to do? I know what I'm about, but then delivering it in a format that like you said, Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours was already achieved. And it's like, okay, just the platform now needs to adjust accordingly.
Exactly. Seth Godin too, he talks about, if you really want to be successful at something, make people's lives better, focus on the service, And so that's the lens through which I approached it. I was like, okay, I want to make something that actually makes people's lives better through these times. And the net result and the feedback that I get all the time, people literally say, they're like, it's like watching Netflix, but the guy is talking back to me in real time, So picture watching your favorite concert DVD, but the person can talk to you and see you.
Right.
And that's kind of what it's been like, and it's been beautiful. I've given these concerts where, like, I also thought about the format where I was like, okay, I don't want to just be doing a one-way communication, so where do I host these things so that there can be interactivity? And I did this concert, this like sort of family and group of friends booked me for a private concert. And, the mom was in Toronto, the grandma was in somewhere in the US, the daughter was in New Zealand. And they asked if I'd play this song that all of them loved. And, they're crying. And it's like, that would never happen in the, like, that wouldn't be possible in the physical space. So we're creating something of high value, of high emotional impact, high meaning, that's uniquely only possible in this format. And so it's always about thinking of like, okay, what's the format and what can it do? What can it do that nobody's thought of yet? So how can I innovate within the space and then build from there?
Well, I think you and I could keep talking. There's so many things that so many variations of things that you've done so far. But Peter, I've enjoyed my time with you, and now that I've met you yet again, and I'll have to thank Blake for that day that he spoke at CAPS, that I was able to. You were in the room, and now I remember you clearly. So again, for anyone. This encompasses so many things when you think of resilience. And if anything I'm walking away with, it's the importance of staying connected to that moral space within yourself of why you do what you do. You know why you started doing what you're doing. Stay connected to that. Get your lifelines in place. Be vulnerable. Like your colleague shared at that camp. Sometimes things that are viewed as strengths are in fact limitations, and trying to push yourself to understand what those are so that you can become the best version of who you need to be. So Peter, again, where can people reach you? And all the links will be in the show notes, so you'll be able to link into things, but tell us where we can reach you for either speaking, and we will also add the link for your new CDs.
Yeah, for sure. So peterkatz.com is KATZ or KATZ for American friends, is the kind of central hub. There's peterkatzspeaks.com as well, which it's also linked at peterkatz.com. So specifically for speaking stuff, peterkatzspeaks.com is a good place to go. But I'm also at Peter Katz Music on Instagram, all the social handles. We're even getting on TikTok now. So so yeah, at Peter Katz Music is a good place to kind of follow along, and there's a contact section at peterkatzspeaks.com, if you're interested in doing a talk. So and I'm always happy to just get on the phone with clients and just see if it's a fit, and just have the discussion of what are you looking for, what are the challenges, and if I'm a good fit, then that becomes evident over the course of the
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And for everyone listening, I'm Roxanne Derhodge of Authentic Living with Roxanne. If you're interested in deep diving further into what it takes to be an authentic leader and leading from your heart, you can reach me at roxannederhodge.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannederhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.